Hello everyone, this is Sodhi from CAAN Wings Consultants Private Limited. Welcome to my weekly YouTube session. In this particular session, I'm going to focus on two major aspects related to Australia migration. One are the nomination opportunities that are soon to become available, and two, the minimum point score required for availing the nominations, or whether you need to increase your points or not. So let's start with the nomination opportunities. So we've been getting updates from various states, and we've so far heard from 3 states which have announced that they will be looking into their migration plans and opening up the nominations. So the first state is the state of Queensland, that is expected to open its nomination program for 190 and 491 applicants in the month of December. And when we say this, we're talking about both onshore and offshore applicants. The second state is the state of South Australia, that is going to fine-tune its migration plan in the end of November, and that is when they will announce as to on what date will they begin accepting the applications for 190 and 491 applications. And the third state we've heard from is the state of NSW, New South Wales. Now, New South Wales has announced that it will soon be letting us know about its nomination for 491 visa. So I guess you have a lot to stay tuned for. Those who've already got the skills assessment done are ready with their files. Just keep a very close watch, because you could get things moving real fast. Now I come down to the next part of my video, that is about the point score. So I have been asked by a lot of people about increasing the point score, and I've seen that there is some sort of a frenzy with people trying to increase their point score by getting the partner skills assessments done, by appearing for NATI and so on. Somehow, a lot of aspirants for Australia seem to be under the impression that in order to be able to get a nomination under 190 or 491, it is kind of essential for them to have a high score on their EOI. Only those with a higher score will have better chances of being of getting a nomination. Now, please understand this. I'd like to repeat myself here. To get a nomination under 190 or 491 visa subclass, it is not the higher score that matters, but the applicant meeting the eligibility criteria for the different states. Now, all states have different occupation lists and different criteria for nomination. So you have to make sure that you fulfill the specific criteria for the state. Your having a higher score will not make you eligible for a nomination just because you have a higher score. But if you're meeting the criteria, you will be eligible to apply for a nomination. Therefore, 65 points is the basic criteria for nomination. And then in addition to that, whatever the individual states' criteria are there, you have to be meeting that as well. Now, I've been trying to think as to where exactly people pick this up from. Why are they confused that probably getting a higher score for nomination purposes is absolutely essential? So I think what I can figure out is that probably people are getting confused because of the high point pathway concept for South Australia and the high point pathway for NSW. Now what happens is, let's go with South Australia first. For the state of South Australia, they come up with their occupation list and the minimum bands required for nomination for each occupation and the minimum years of experience and so on. Now, South Australia is also open to giving nominations to those whose occupations are not listed in their list of eligible occupations, provided they have met a certain high point score, which was usually around 85 or so. So I'm just saying that hypothetically. So because South Australia had a pathway, an additional pathway for routing your applications through for those applicants whose occupations are either on the supplementary list or under special conditions, or those whose occupations have not been listed on South Australia's list of eligible occupations, they can still apply for nomination if they're meeting a certain high point score, for example, let's say 85 points or 90 points. So because of this, people are probably under the impression that South Australia would only be nominating if you have a very high score, whereas that's not so. South Australia has been giving nominations to applicants with even 65 points. So I hope you see the difference there, that the standard nomination process or criteria is one thing, and a high point pathway is another route for routing your application. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a higher score in order to be nominated by South Australia. Another state which has a high point criteria is NSW, New South Wales. Now, like South Australia had a high point criteria for both 491 as well as 190 applications. So anybody whose occupations is not listed on South Australia's list, but the person does have a very high score, is free to go ahead and make an application, apply for a 190 or a 491 nomination with South Australia. That is how it works for South Australia. Now, when we're talking about NSW, NSW has a high point pathway only for 190 applicants. So what NSW does is that, unlike South Australia, it doesn't really specify a specific score as to this is the score we are looking at. It is at the discretion of NSW as to what applications they consider to be high point applications and who they pick or whom they do not pick. And a very interesting situation associated with this is, of course, now the point score, threshold point score is 65, but earlier it used to be 60. So we have received invitations to apply for a 190 nomination for many of our clients from NSW, and interestingly, those clients had only 60 points at that time, and they had just 6 bands in each section. However, their application was selected under the high point pathway to go ahead and apply for a nomination, and the visas and all, of course, have been granted. They're already in Australia now. So you need to understand here that it's probably just at the discretion of the NSW government. While somebody with just 60 point was deemed as okay to be meeting the high point criteria, there could have been, or there were applicants who had much higher scores than the ones who were picked up, but they were not picked up. So I don't really know how bankable is this. So whether you should be actually aggressively working towards increasing your score just because you think that probably your application too should be picked up. Rather, it is very important that you prepare your applications in accordance with the various requirements of the state, so that you do not miss the nomination opportunities for any state. Now, having said that, while many applicants are able to process their skills assessments themselves, nominations is something very tricky. It is very, very technical, and I very strongly recommend, though the immigration department or states do not really say that you have to route your application through a migration agent. You're free to do it on your own individually, but I strongly recommend that you do engage a very experienced migration agent for assisting you with the nominations, simply because the criteria is so different from one state to another. And I've actually seen a lot of people lost between those of who already have a positive skills assessment. Some applicants have yet not lodged their expression of interest with the skill select because they feel that probably we will be lodging the EOI, the expression of interest, once our occupation is listed on any of the state's occupation lists. So that is something you should have actually done. And on the other hand, we see a lot of applicants who have lodged multiple EOIs, thinking that they'll lodge one EOI for each state, and that is how they'll maximize their chances of getting a nomination. So that again is not something you should be getting into. So my recommendation is, please do engage a good consultant who can guide you about the diverse documentations associated with each state. Each state has different set of requirements which can be totally different from one state to another. It is very important that once your skills assessment has been approved, your documentation for nomination is ready for all the states, so that whichever state opens its list, you know that you already have documentation in place for the specific requirements of that state. So for those of you who are already done with the assessments, please feel free to share your EOIs and skills assessment with us, and we'll be happy to take your case forward from here on. Those of you who have not yet started with the process, please get your skills assessment done as soon as possible. Get started with your process. We may have to route a lot of applications through the priority process for certain occupations. We think that may be open for a very limited time, so you may not have enough time with you. Please do send us your detailed CVs or your documents on CaanWings@gmail.com. That is CAAN wings@gmail.com, or you can even call us on 78498 78498. So I hope to hear from all of you and assist you in any possible way that I can. Until next time, it's Diamond Sodhi from CAAN Wings. Goodbye and take care.